Sean Hannity used to have his head so far up Ted Cruz's ass that when Ted Cruz opened up his mouth, you could see Sean Hannity's eyeballs. And then when Hannity realized that Trump was going to get the nomination after Cruz dropped out, all of a sudden he shifted over to Trump faster than greased lightning. Now, Hannity's going to give Trump a softball interview on Fox just to prove how much Fox loves him. Sean Hannity, this guy has no problem jumping from right-wing nut to right-wing nut with no impunity.
Here with Reaction 2016, presumptive, well, he will be, the Republican nominee. Donald Trump is with us. Mr. Trump, good to see you.
Hi, Sean.
Your take on the meeting, what do you think?
I thought it was a great meeting. We discussed a lot of things, a lot of very important things, and I thought it was really a very, very good meeting. I think Paul felt the same way, and everybody else did also.
Yeah.
I wonder if Paul told you that he runs a show and you can't do jack shit without him, because the power to do all of the things that you claim you want to do, they all rest primarily in the House of Representatives. And you can't do anything about tariffs. You can't do anything about building a wall, because the wall needs to be funded first. And the House of Representatives handles all spending bills. So if they don't allocate any money, you ain't building any walls. And also, as far as restricting people from entering the country, obviously you can't do that, because the First Amendment prohibits discrimination based on religion. So hopefully Paul basically gave you a lesson in the Constitution and the powers of the executive branch versus the legislative branch, so that you understand which way the wind is blowing. But then again, I doubt it.
You know, maybe it's just me. There's a part of me that thinks, I understand that people saying, you're the nominee, you have the job to unite the party, but doesn't he, as the Speaker of the House, also have that job?
Well, I think he does, and I think he's doing a good job. He's got not an easy job, and I don't mind going through a little bit of a slow process. It's a very big subject. I mean, we have a lot of things, and I think for the most part we agree on a lot of different items, and we're getting there. I feel very strongly about border security. I feel very strongly about trade. I feel very strongly about building up the military, and, you know, to a large extent, I think Paul is there also, so yeah, we'll get there. I'm pretty sure.
But I've interviewed you a lot in this process. You say you want conservative justices to the Supreme Court. You said you'll even give us a pool of names before the election, right?
Right, I'm going to do that, yes.
Right. All right, so you're going to build a wall. That's conservative. Conservative justices obviously are. You've said to me repeatedly you want to get our budget back in balance, that you will repeal and replace Obamacare, right, likely with health care savings accounts?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Common Core, we're going to get rid of Common Core, bring education locally. We're going to do that. We're going to protect our Second Amendment, so important, so important. And, you know, the Second Amendment is being chipped away at. And as far as Hillary's concerned, she wants...
See, and that's the thing that kind of bugged me the other day when I heard him give a speech. It's not protecting the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is there. It's protecting our rights underneath the Second Amendment. Honestly, I don't believe that he even knows really what the Second Amendment is. But it's just like when I don't believe he's ever opened up and read a Bible, because anybody that does knows that it's 2 Corinthians, not 2 Corinthians.
To abolish the Second Amendment. I really believe she wants to abolish the Second Amendment. Her whole view on guns she's a disaster in so many different ways. So we're going to, I think we really had a great meeting today, and I think we agree on a lot of things, and it'll be a little process, but it'll come along, pretty sure.
Yeah. And then you want to be energy independent. You said you want to take care of vets. You want to build up the military. Maybe it's me, and maybe I'm a little cynical here. What does he want to know? Why is this so hard for him to say, yeah, I agree with him on all of those issues right there, and Hillary Clinton is on the other side? I don't understand why that's so hard.
Well, I think a big thing today was the judges, you know, the justices, Supreme Court, and I think that they felt very good about it. I had this idea a couple of months ago because I was getting a little bit of pushback from some great people and some great friends of mine that are in Congress, and they were telling me that, you know, how can we feel a little bit better? And I came up with this idea that I would come up with a list of really, really terrific, acceptable judges, conservative, and I'll put that list forward, and that'll be a list from which I'll choose, or at least a list, at a minimum, a list from which I'll sort of use as a guide. And I'll tell you, that went a long way. People really like that idea a lot.
How much you want to bet we don't see a list anytime soon? Just like he's promised to deliver on his taxes, and now he's backed away from that promise. So, and the other thing is, if you ever listen to Donald Trump, he only speaks in superlatives, especially when he's describing anything to do with himself, his companies, etc. Everything is always the greatest, the best. There's none better than him. He knows more. You know, he knows more than everybody else, etc., etc., etc. And to me, that basically is a megalomaniac speaking. Anyway, and this judge thing, you know, that's bullshit. We're not going to hear anything about the. Yeah, I severely doubt that he's going to put forward. If he does put forward a list, we won't see that till deep into the fight between him and Clinton.
I think a lot of people do, and I've even heard people talk about maybe even naming some cabinet positions. I mean, you've got a team of people. You got Ben Carson working for you now. Chris Christie's working for you now. Would you maybe name some of those people along with Vice President before the election?
I do think so. I think before the election I'd name some, and I think they'd be really great. We have some great names. You just mentioned two of them, but we have some other great names, and they want to be involved. They would love to be involved, and, you know, I get it.
Yeah, it's again with the great. But there are a lot of people who absolutely have said that there is no way that they want to serve as a vice president for Trump. He's going to make mention of that a little later on in this video, and I'm going to make a specific comment about that one.
All of these people that are saying they really don't want to be understood. They don't want to be for the vice president position, but none of those people were asked. I mean, it's like one of those things, you know, they're all turning me down, but they were never asked. And I guess they turned me down because they know they're not going to be asked. But
no, they turned you down because they don't want to be asked. But your ego would not allow you to even consider that.
We have some incredible people for vice president that I think you'll be very impressed with, and I'll do that announcement probably during the convention in Cleveland.
Let's talk. There was a report this week you narrowed it down to 5 or 6 people. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say that's true. That's true.
And you're going to give me an exclusive news-breaking hint right here. Anything you can tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you you'll like most of them. I'm not sure about all of them, but you'll like most of them. But I think the end result is you'll like the final pick, which is the only one that counts. And you know, we're going to have some interesting days and nights ahead because it's really tough. I mean, it's a tough decision. You have some that are really, really strong in some areas. We want to get somebody that's really good in all areas. And
okay, so he said some that are really, really good in some areas. And he wants someone that's really, really good in all areas. Well, if the some are just really, really good in some areas, aren't those automatically kicked to the side until you find that person that's really, really good in all areas? So that should cut your list down even further, unless you're talking about you got 5 or 6 people that are really, really good in all areas. What he's saying is not making a lot of sense.
I think we have a few that are really excellent and that people are going to like and really respect as people.
Let's talk. Some issues came up this week about, in the last week and a half, some ambiguity on issues of minimum wage, raising taxes, whether or not you were softening your stance about bringing refugees into the country. So let's clarify. Minimum wage.
Okay, well, let me just tell you, the only thing I am talking about a little bit is I like the idea of the states looking at minimum wage, because if they don't, you know, New York is totally different than if you go to Alabama, Arkansas, so many places that I love. They voted for me. I love them all. But you're talking about a whole different, cost of living. So what's good for New York is not necessarily good for someplace else. New York is very expensive to live in, and I could see having more in New York and less in other places, and yet your standard of living might be better in Alabama or, as I said, Arkansas and other places than it would be in New York, even though New York would have a higher minimum wage. So I really like giving it to states to determine. Plus, they have to compete with each other among, other things, but they have to compete with each other. So I like the concept of giving it to states. And in some states where it's more expensive, maybe they do have to lift the minimum wage. And in others, they won't have to do it, and those people live very well. So that's the way it is. Now, they also have to compete with each other in business. So I really like the idea because it's so different. It's a big country. It's so different, and the cost of living is so different. I like letting the states set the minimum wage.
How about...
All right, there's a problem with that, and the problem has to do with Social Security. You're in New York, you have a, let's call it $15 minimum wage, okay, because the state of New York sets that. All right, and you're paying Social Security based on the income that you're generating. You're in Alabama, and let's say Alabama keeps a minimum wage of like $7.50. Okay, so that's basically half. And obviously, you're paying Social Security based on 50%. Now, the person from New York decides that he wants to retire in New York. He gets a certain amount of money per month because of the amount of Social Security that he's paid in, and obviously, the number of quarters that he's worked. He then decides he wants to move to Alabama, okay? Now, with two different minimum wages, they're going to have to take a look at the amount of money, okay, that he basically paid in for working the same number of hours and potentially on the same job as that person in Alabama. The person, both people are now living in Alabama. The person in New York, does he get the Social Security benefit for the quarters worked in New York? Okay, at a higher rate, or does the state of Alabama have to go back, or Social Security have to go back, decide exactly how much money he earned in New York and wherever else it is, and then turn around and pay him whatever the amount is in Alabama. All right, so if he's working the same job in two different states for the same amount of time, it doesn't seem fair that he would get a lesser amount because he happened to work a job in Alabama versus working a job in New York. That doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense.
Tax increases. I saw that you had said, well, maybe we'll raise taxes on the wealthy. You clarified it on Twitter.
I didn't clarify, John. Look, these people on minimum wage, number one, I said about states, and I think it's very clear, and I think it's a good idea. And I've been universally praised for that. As far as taxes are concerned, all I said is when I put in taxes, it's really a proposal. It's not a policy. It's not anything. It's a proposal. So you put in taxes because you're going to have to negotiate with Congress. You're going to have to negotiate with senators, and you're going to have to negotiate with Congress people. And it's going to be a tough negotiation. I'm going to possibly have to lift it from my proposal, but that proposal, and even when lifted, will be a lot cheaper than it is right now. As you know, Larry Kudlow is in love with my plan, and Larry Kudlow is a fantastic guy, and Larry Kudlow he likes my plan the best, but my plan is the biggest cut of anybody. I have the biggest tax cut of anyone. But remember, when I put in the proposal and proposed rates and everything else, it's going to be negotiated. You're not going to put in and everyone's going to say, oh, that's wonderful, I'm going to leave it right there. So I expect, now I will tell you, we're taking care of big league of the middle class, we're taking care of business. Our business taxes are being reduced by by a tremendous sum. And I will say, perhaps from my low proposal, perhaps the wealthy will go a little bit up from that standpoint, but that's all I was saying. They're not going up. So that's not a clarification. That's just all you have to do is read it. And I'll tell you who covered it well. Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal had a front page article, covered what I said so well, because the Wall Street Journal writer really got it. He understood it. It was covered so perfectly.
Oh, listen,
All right, let's talk about that tax proposal, quote unquote. That tax proposal that he has out there doesn't mean shit. All right. if Paul Ryan will make the decision on what will happen with taxes. All right. If Paul Ryan agrees with him, then that particular proposal may see the light of day. If Paul Ryan doesn't agree with him, that tax proposal is dead on arrival. Donald Trump has no ability, authority, or anything else to make into a reality any type of changes in the tax structure. That all falls to the purvey of Paul Ryan and the House of Representatives. And Trump needs a lesson in exactly how things work, and hopefully Paul Ryan explained to him how things work, and that he could say anything he wants about all the subjects that he's talking about, but the true power lies in the House of Representatives and with the Speaker of the House.
When you really look at the latest numbers that have come out, this is the scary part. And I asked you a lot when we were on the road together. I'd ask you almost every interview. I mean, you have 1 in 5 families that don't have a single family member in the workforce. Look at young people today. Young men, 18 to 34, this is staggering. 1 in 6 are either incarcerated or don't have a job. Now, if we don't turn that around, then our country is in decline, and irreparably so in many ways. That's going to be probably the biggest challenge you have, right?
Well, we're losing our businesses, we're losing our manufacturing. You know, I won New York, and I won Pennsylvania and Maryland. I won everything. I won every state. You look at Indiana, which was the most recent one, and then the other night we just had a fantastic night also in Nebraska, in West Virginia. You look at what's happened to West Virginia with the miners, where Hillary Clinton says she wants to put the miners and the mines out of business, and I say just the opposite. We're going to put the miners back to work, and we're going to open up the mines. It is just insane what's going on. She's like a job-killing machine. She is horrible in terms of the economy, horrible. Don't forget, it was her husband who signed NAFTA, which was probably the greatest, in terms of a disaster, the greatest disaster we've ever had economically for jobs. I went through New York and Pennsylvania and Maryland and Connecticut, all these states. They're like empty. The jobs have been sucked out of us. They've moved to Mexico. China's taken our business. We have to get our country back to work. We don't have any jobs. And I can do it. Believe me, that's what I do best.
Every exit poll shows jobs, the economy, are people's top concern. Obviously, this president has accumulated more debt than every other president before him combined. Let me ask you another issue. James Comey, our FBI director, our assistant FBI director, Obama's special envoy to defeat ISIS, General Allen, our director of national intelligence, James Clapper, our Homeland Security Chairman, Mike McCall, have all said ISIS will infiltrate the refugee population. You took a strong stand. It was reported today that you said, well, that's only a suggestion, a temporary ban. Explain.
No, I would not allow people to come in from Syria. They're not vetted properly. They're moving in by the thousands. You remember I told you thousands of people are going to pour in? I turned out to be right. Everyone's...
Now, did he just change again? He came out initially, it's been recorded multiple times, he was against letting any Muslim enter the country. Now it sounds like he's talking just about Syria and I guess Muslims or people from Syria. So okay, he's flipped again. So and now, quote unquote, it's just a proposal. Well, it wasn't just a proposal when you first offered it, and every time you get out in your rallies, you're screaming blue murder about it, which is pumping up your crowds.
I was wrong. I was right. Thousands of people are coming in from Syria. We don't know who they are. If you look at the migration, you have a lot of young, strong men. You look at the women. Where are the women and children? You don't have many by comparison. We cannot allow people to come in from Syria, and I would stop it, and I would stop it immediately. We have tens of thousands of people coming into this country. We don't know who they are. There's no paperwork. There's no documentation. Now, with that being said, build safe zones over in Syria, and I'll get the Gulf states to pay for it because our country has no money. We have to rebuild our infrastructure in this country. So we have a disaster going on in our country. Our roads, our highways, our bridges, our tunnels, our airports, our hospitals, our everything, our schools. We have a disaster going on. So we're going to
Now, I don't disagree with him about the pay for those safe zones. Is that the same way you're going to get Mexico to pay for the wall? Idiotic.
Build our country. We have to start. We've spent now almost $5 trillion in the Middle East. We can't do this anymore. We have to get back. Now we have to knock the hell out of ISIS, that I have to say. But we have to get back to rebuilding our country.
We'll take a break. The Washington Post has an army of 20 people. We'll go back to Hannity as we continue now with 2016 Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. You had the Quinnipiac poll. You're winning by 4 in Ohio. You're dead even in Pennsylvania and Florida. How do you interpret that poll?
Well, I think really good. We have to win Florida. I think I'll win Florida. I won Florida against Marco by a massive, massive number. We had 20% victory. Everybody said, wow, that's incredible. That's a great state for me. And Pennsylvania, we just won massively, as you know, and I think we're going to win that against Hillary easily. She wants to put the miners and steel out of business, essentially. She wants the miners out of business. I think we're going to win Pennsylvania. And Ohio is a great state for me. Ohio is fantastic. I actually did very well in Ohio. We had a great number.
And you went up against the popular governor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every Republican swears. They always swear that Pennsylvania is in play. Pennsylvania's not in play. Philadelphia, which is basically, I'm not going to say 100%, but highly Democratic, basically controls which way Pennsylvania goes. And then when you throw Pittsburgh and Akron in, which are all highly Democratic cities, Pittsburgh is not in play. You can claim that all you want, but it's not going to work.
I mean, I did a very good job. If I would have been there for 2 more days, you would have seen. But we did a very good. We got a great number in Ohio.
You look at the Clinton. I don't know if you've ever seen years ago. They came out with the War Room, how the Clintons fought back in 1992 against George Herbert Walker Bush. Very insightful. Gives you some insight, by the way, into your friend George Stephanopoulos. I don't know if you've seen that, but we know about the Clinton machine. We know they play dirty. We know they'll say and do anything to get elected. Between that and the Washington Post announcing that they have put 20 people to dig into every single phase of your life, are you prepared for what's coming? It's not if it's coming, but when it's coming.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because every hour we're getting calls from reporters on the Washington Post asking ridiculous questions. And I will tell you, this is owned as a toy by Jeff Bezos, who controls Amazon. Amazon is getting away with murder tax-wise. He's using the Washington Post for power so that the politicians in Washington don't tax Amazon like they should be taxed. He's getting absolutely away. He's worried about me, and I think he said that to somebody. It was in some article where he thinks I would go after him for antitrust, because he's got a huge antitrust problem, because he's controlling so much. Amazon is controlling so much of what they're doing. And what they...
hopefully Amazon's controlling 100% of what they're doing, not so much of what they're doing. And the one thing about Amazon is you can see the amount of taxes that the corporation pays, because Amazon is pretty much publicly traded, whereas we're still waiting to see your tax situation.
What they've done is he bought this paper for practically nothing, and he's using that as a tool for political power against me and against other people. And I'll tell you what, we can't let him get away with it. So he's got about 20, 25. I just heard they're taking these really bad stories. I mean, they're wrong. I don't even say bad. They're wrong. And in many cases, they have no proper information, and they're putting them together, they're slopping them together, and they're going to do a book. And the book is going to be all false stuff, because the stories are so wrong. And the reporters, I mean, one after another. So what they're doing is he's using that as a political instrument to try and stop antitrust, which he thinks, I believe, he's antitrust. In other words, what he's got is a monopoly. And he wants to make sure I don't get in. So It's one of those things. But I'll tell you what, what he's doing is wrong, and the people are the whole system is rigged. You see a case like that, the whole system is rigged.
That's pretty corrupt.
All right, Donald, we all know that you know what the word liable means, and we all know that you have a proclivity for wanting to sue people. So whenever this book comes out, if the book is wrong, i.e. it hasn't been properly vetted and documented, obviously you are going to want to sue Amazon or Bezos for $100 million for libel, and you will obviously win the case. I know that Bezos has got a shitload of attorneys, so that whenever that book comes out, they're going to have all their bases covered, and you're going to look like a goddamn fool.
I think that's a good point.
Bezos?
Yeah, well, you know.
No, he's using, let me,
Yeah.
he's using the Washington Post, which is peanuts, he's using that for political purposes to save Amazon in terms of taxes and in terms of antitrust.
Wow. Let me ask about Hillary. You commented about her being an enabler. You talked about the abuse of women. And, you know, look, those women, I've interviewed Juanita Broderick, Paula Jones, Kathleen Willey, and a lot of other women. And they tell their stories. More importantly, they tell about how they were smeared and slandered and besmirched when they did tell their stories. I haven't heard you talk a lot about the email server investigation. I haven't heard you talk a lot about the Clinton Foundation. Hillary says she's for women. The foundation took a lot of money from the Saudis, and I've never heard her criticize the Saudis' treatment of women. Is that because they bought her silence?
Well, I talk about the emails all the time. I mean, and what can you say? Does it get any more corrupt or crooked than that? And it looks like she's being protected. Otherwise, how would they let her go down the line this far? And just before she gets this phony nomination, you talk about a rig. I watch this guy, Bernie Sanders. I'm no fan of his, but I watch him win every night, and everybody says he can't win. He wins, he wins, he wins, he can't win because she has these super delegates. So I'm talking about that all the time. The Clinton Foundation obviously is looking to me like it's got some big problems. If you read the book, if you see the movie that's coming out, I mean, the movie that's coming out is brutal from what I understand. So,
yeah, the movie that's coming out, they have already vetted the movie, and they said that movie has so many falsehoods in it that it should basically be a work of science fiction. But you know, that being said, as far as the Saudis are concerned, yeah, you know, I'm agreeing that you know, the Saudis are pieces of shit. But in my mind, you know, he's dealt with a lot of pieces of shit around the world, and he's bought. Out of his own mouth, he claims that he's bought politicians and uses money for influence. So he really can't say much of anything else. And final note on that, I always thought it was innocent until proven guilty. In Donald's case, I guess Clinton is guilty until proven innocent. So
I actually know all about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the emails all the time. Look. People have done like 2% of what she did, and they've destroyed their life over it. And what she's done with the emails is horrible. Now, I hear the man that set it up and set up the server has gone absolutely rogue, so let's see what happens. But I think she's got some big problems with that. I just don't know whether or not they'll prosecute.
Nearly half of Bernie Sanders' West Virginia voters say they will vote for you instead of Hillary. Her donors, literally, they sent out an email the other night saying even if Bernie runs the table on the remaining states, the corrupt system of superdelegates gives it to Hillary. So she's doing very, very poorly here. I'll give you an example. Back in 2008, when she ran in West Virginia, she had 240,000 votes. She got less than 85,000. What do you make of how she can't close out this nomination on her side?
She's not a closer here. She wasn't a closer last time. She's not a closer with the Chinese for trade deals. She's not going to be a closer with ISIS. She destroyed us. She really hurt us with Libya. That's Benghazi. Not only that, ISIS has the oil now. They've gone and taken the oil. Libya was her baby, and that was a disaster. I mean, what she's done has been a disaster. She's not a closer. You know, the bottom line, whether it's the election or whether it's the election against Obama, you know, in terms of the primaries, she's just not a closer. This is not a woman that should be president. We have so much work to do. I don't think she has the energy to be president. I don't think she can do it. I don't think she can do it. You see it right now. She cannot close the deal.
If you look at exit polls in every state, same answer. Republicans feel betrayed by their own party. I think that's playing a very big part in how this election has played out. I guess the question is, there's been two moments, I think, where conservative policies have made America a better place. You talk about Ronald Reagan. I think that was one of most recent examples. The other would be the contract with America. These promises that you make about the wall, about judges, about Obamacare, balancing the budget, about schools and energy and vets and the military and all these things,
right.
Would it be a good idea to put it on paper and say to your fellow Republicans, we're going to do these things, sign the paper, promise the American people. They're tired of being lied to. They're tired of being betrayed, and sign it and say, this is my promise if you elect me.
I mean, I'd have no problem doing it. I'm going to do it with the judges because I think it would make people feel better, especially people, you know, certain people within the party that happen to be on the very conservative side. I think it would make them feel better. That's why I'm doing it. But I think everybody knows. First of all, Obamacare, it's gonna fall of its own weight. You know, in 17 it explodes. It's dead. Okay, it's dead. It is an absolute disaster. Unfortunately, let's say I'm president, I have to inherit this mess. But we hopefully will terminate it before it even explodes. But in 17 it's a disaster. Well, I'm going to do all these things. I could certainly put it in paper, but we have to do these things. We need the wall. You know, the 16,500 Border Patrol agents just endorsed me. First time they've ever endorsed a presidential candidate. And I went to them and I said, what about the wall? They said, Mr. Trump, we really need the wall. We're going to stop the drugs. We're going to stop the problems. Believe me, Sean.
All right.
All right. Now, you'll notice that he didn't say he was going to put it in writing and do it. He said he certainly could put it in writing. So, to me, you're never going to see anything like that from this guy. So, conclusion on this thing, Hannity, you know, is an asshole, and you could tell who he's supporting by the types of questions that he asks. And anytime he likes somebody, he always asks them leading softball questions in order to give them the best opportunity to make themselves look as good as possible. And you know, that's just the thing about Fox. That's why anybody with half a brain that doesn't agree with Fox is smart enough not to go on the programs, because number one, it's always a contentious interview, and number two, the hosts normally cut people off without giving an opportunity to give a full answer. Trump is a joke. And the one question I wanted to hear asked, which I knew I wasn't going to hear asked, was what about his butler and his proclivity for wanting to have President Obama killed?